while it's seen a lot of change over its many years of existence, Anzac Day remains a special commemoration for Australia. It traditionally marks the anniversary of the beginning of the Gallipoli campaign of the First World War, when Australian and New Zealand soldiers landed on the beaches of the Gallipoli Peninsula on the 25th of April 1915. Today it remains rooted in this legacy, but it has expanded to also commemorate other military conflicts, together with Remembrance Day. It goes back a long way and there is a lot of history, so here are 5 things that you may not know about Anzac Day. The first is that the dawn service was not actually part of the first Anzac Days. Perhaps the best known part of Anzac Day commemoration events is the dawn service. It's held sometime around dawn on Anzac Day. It consists of many different components, including a reading of the Ode of Remembrance, last post bugle call, 1 to 2 minutes of silence, and the laying of wreaths. But this was not included as part of the official Anzac Day events until 1928. Its exact origins are not known for sure, but there are records of a church service being held at dawn on Anzac Day as far back as 1918, in Albany in Western Australia. The story goes that in 1927, a group of returned soldiers came upon a woman who was laying flowers at the Centre Path in Sydney, which is a memorial in the city centre on Martin Place. After this encounter, they decided to come back the following year as an organised event. And so in 1928, about 150 people attended this dawn service at the Centre Path, and other places around Australia followed suit. It seems that the connection to the time of the Gallipoli landings wasn't made until later. But as I said, there is a lot to these traditions that isn't definitively documented, so we may never know for sure. The second is that Anzac is usually spelled without all capital letters. Now I know that this one will cause some consternation, but there is a clear-cut answer to the perennial question, is Anzac spelled with or without all capital letters? Well, there are specific official regulations about this that are pretty clear. The Commonwealth Government's official guidance is, quote, "As a proper noun, Anzac is always written with a capital A at the start and all other letters in lowercase." This is corroborated by other official sources, including the Anzac Memorial in New South Wales and the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. Even the federal legislation protecting the use of the word is spelled Anzac with lowercase letters all the way through. The only time Anzac is spelled in all capital letters is to refer to the military formations, that is, the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. These protocols are not new and go all the way back to when the word was first used by soldiers, historians, and others during the First World War itself. If you want to find out more about this specifically, check out the website that I've linked in the video description below for a more detailed explanation. The third is that the 1927 Anzac Day event in Melbourne was so busy that over 300 people were injured. Anzac Day has attracted large crowds through most, although not all, of its history. Sometimes these can even be a little bit too big. In 1927, there were so many people out to watch the Anzac Day march in the streets of Melbourne that over 300 people were injured in crowd crushes. Fortunately, nobody died, as there were first aid posts and ambulances set up as part of the event. The main incident was outside what was then Federal Parliament House, where 174 people were treated. It's worth noting here that the numbers of people attending the main Anzac Day parade and events fluctuates a lot. For example, 1950 saw a record crowd of over 400,000 people watch the march through the centre of Melbourne, hailed by the media as the greatest Anzac Day march the people of Melbourne have witnessed. But just 4 years later, newspapers reported on a much smaller attendance figure of just 60,000, described as, quote, almost spiritless, perhaps related to the phenomenon of the forgotten Korean War. The fourth is that the date of Anzac Day was proposed to be moved. Anzac Day is synonymous today with the 25th of April, but this date was nearly changed several times, mostly for it to move to the nearest Sunday or even something else. For example, in the mid-1920s there were serious proposals to change the date in Victoria. In 1920, Anzac Day was declared a national holiday by the Commonwealth Government and set for the 25th of April. Although many RSL branches held ceremonies and services on the nearest Sunday as well, the 25th of April was fixed as the official date for all of Australia. But this fixture seems to have almost immediately started a campaign to get it moved. This was mainly because businesses and activities remained open, which many felt was disrespectful to the day, despite appeals from Prime Minister Billy Hughes for places to remain closed. The 1920 declaration as a national holiday at the time did not carry restrictions on trading, unlike others like Easter and Christmas. But when momentum gathered to have these trading restrictions put in place, there was a new campaign to move the date. And this came from business interests who were worried about the impact on their finances. The main push for this was from the Employers' Federation and retailers, who wanted the day moved to the nearest Sunday instead. There was even an attempt in the Victorian Parliament to amend the Anzac Day Bill to have the day commemorated on the nearest Sunday. But this didn't succeed, and it remained as the 25th of April. Then the 1930s saw further attempts to get the day moved, this time from within the RSL itself. From at least 1936, there were official deputations from unit associations to hold a plebiscite of all returned soldiers in Victoria on whether or not to change the date. An advocacy group even formed to support this campaign, called the Anzac Day Better Observance Movement. The proposal even made it to the 1938 Victorian State Branch Conference, where it was defeated quite convincingly, with the state president blaming, quote, motives outside the League for advocating a plebiscite. There have been many other attempts to move the date for various reasons, but none of these succeeded, and the day remains on the 25th of April, the date of the first landings at Gallipoli. The fifth and final one is that the minute's silence was not part of the first Anzac Days. While a minute's silence or variance of this has been a part of Remembrance Day across the world since it began, this did not form part of official Anzac Day ceremonies in Victoria until much later. In fact, the reason why it was introduced into Victoria's Anzac Days was the result of a series of reforms made by the Victorian State Council of the RSL in 1938. One of these was replacing the Christian Protestant service with 2 minutes to allow for silent prayer, to acknowledge and accommodate soldiers who were of different or no religion. Before this change, it was reported that hundreds of marching soldiers were obliged to drop out of the march early because of this service, particularly Roman Catholic and Jewish people. This reform caused a lot of arguments and led to the resignation of the Anzac Day Commemoration Council. Following the change, the Protestant Archbishop of Melbourne, Frederick Head, refused to take part in the Anzac Day service, and he and his padres dropped out of the march early. The Protestant Church's leadership continued to boycott the event the following year in 1939, and continued their boycott until at least 1940. I can't find an end date for their protest, but if anyone knows, please get in touch. So that's how the minute's silence made its way into Anzac Day, at least here in Melbourne. With Anzac Day coming up soon on the 25th of April, make sure you head to one of the many services around Australia and the world. For us here in Melbourne, the largest is held at the Shrine of Remembrance on St Kilda Road, but there are also many local ones. You can find your closest service by checking with your local RSL or online at the link I've provided in the video description below. And if you can't attend in person, it is broadcast live on ABC television and streamed online. I will also be donating the ad revenue from this video to the Melbourne branch of Legacy, which is a charity who support the families of people who served and gave their lives or health in doing so. If you would like to make a donation or find out more information, make sure you visit legacy.com.au. Thanks as always for watching, and lest we forget.